Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, first, the Garbers, Nick and Stabby, apologize for not being able to make it. They said it was a national security issue. Probably means Taco Tuesday gone bad, but we don't judge. But you got me, you got Shane, you got Len, you got all the cool folks. All the ones that matter are here. And with that, Len, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
I am Len Berry, the writer of Ethereal Darkness, and I love stories that make shit blow up. I love stories that make people think. I love stories that make people think so much their heads blow up.
Nice. That's an average goal. Have you actually gotten like for your rating scale, you know, they do stars. You should do on your website, like number of heads exploded.
That's a good idea. I'll have to steal that.
I did that when I would do book reviews before I started writing for Upstream. I would do like grenades instead of stars because it's kind of mill sci-fi branding. But I could see you doing exploding heads.
I like that.
And have you seen the movie Hot Shot and Hot Shot Part 2?
It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, they had the counter at the bottom, more kills than, and then they would just
yes.
movies.
I remember that.
Too.
I remember
more kills than Rambo. Although I didn't think Rambo, at least not in First Blood. I didn't think he killed that many.
No, the amount of kills in Rambo
First Blood
in First Blood are very low. I remember when I was a kid, my aunt and uncle, they did a kill count for the movie Commando.
Oh, how bad was it?
It was in the 300s.
Holy crap.
High
okay.
200, low 300. And actually it held that title, the title of like bloodiest, most kills on screen until The Last Samurai came out. And The Last Samurai actually mopped the floor with it by like quadruple.
I mean, if you want to get technical, we watched billions die when Alderaan got blown up. I mean, that did happen.
But you didn't see the individual people die.
True.
You saw the planet blow up. Whereas in Commando, you see a guy get shot and he does a little dance and falls off the roof.
Yeah. Although the best death scene still goes to Buffy the Vampire Slayer at the end of the movie when that one vampire dies. And it's even funnier when you know, because this is Spooktober, right? When they're listening to this. And it's even funnier when you know that was just him goofing off and they're like, yeah, we're leaving it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul nailed that one.
Yeah, I wonder how many other of the best parts of movies happen when actors just goof off thinking it'll never get added.
Star Wars?
Maybe.
Guardians of the Galaxy. There's a bunch in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that. I know, who is the Mork and Mindy guy? I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Robin Williams?
Robin Williams. He was famous for that, too.
Oh, my God, yes.
Well, I think Good Morning Vietnam was almost all ad-libbed by Robin Williams.
I still use that as an example, that scene where he does the radio talk for like 3 minutes with nothing but acronyms, and it still made perfect sense. And I'm like, yep, that's pretty much the military in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say he ad-libbed almost that entire, set of dialogue throughout the whole film.
I believe it. All right, so Shane, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Yeah, hi, I'm Shane Gries. I just retired after 35 years in the Army. I spent 18 of those years overseas, infantry officer. And about 5 years ago, I started writing novels. So I took my military experience and kind of wove that into military science fiction novels I was writing at the time. And then more recently, my publisher asked me to start writing zombie apocalypse stuff, which is all centered around the 1st Infantry Division fighting in the Midwest against zombies, which I've had great fun with. And I seem to, have a series out there that folks, they like it. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. And we didn't want to interrupt this discussion about this iconic movie with an ad spot that didn't seem to be on point because I don't have any in the inventory that fit this movie. So what we're going to do instead, dear listener, is we're going to let the guest sponsor it. And it looks like Len had a technical issue. Hopefully he restarts and pops right back in. So in the meantime, we're going to throw the book cover up, which is part of the Big Dead 1 series. This is the book 2 cover just because it looks the coolest.
And Dragon Award finalist was this one.
So what can you tell us about this series? Give us the I don't want to say, I guess give us the pitch for the series for people who haven't watched those episodes. And if you haven't, you should check him out. It was a fun interview and he talks all about it. And we get nerdy about all things logistical and tactical and gun related. So in our defense, Shane, we were not supervised.
we weren't, and there may have been drinking involved.
Maybe
there isn't right now, but again, no, the series, our protagonist is doing hard time at the Fort Leavenworth disciplinary barracks. And there is a biological weapon that's released that turns people into zombies. And the government is trying to get a lid on this thing before it gets out of control. So a brigade from the 1st Infantry Division out of Fort Riley, Kansas, is sent into Kansas City because Kansas City is the nexus of road and rail networks in the Midwest. As this zombie outbreak is occurring, our hero is on a work release detail, cutting hair at a barbershop. Things happen. He escapes. He puts on an Army uniform. He, being an Army soldier previously, can act the talk, walk the walk. As he's trying to escape through Kansas City, he gets rolled up in a checkpoint and integrated into a unit as they're fighting for their lives during the outbreak. And in the initial days, due to the restrictions of posse comitatus, active duty infantry units are not, issued ammunition. The National Guard is. So our heroes in tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles are rolling through the city without any bullets, trying to deal with zombies.
That's not as far-fetched as people would think, because I've talked to people who did the policing action in Kosovo, and it was like that. They would be at the checkpoint, and then in the back, however many feet would be the command center where all the bullets were. So if it actually went down, they're already retreating from the start.
Yeah.
So that stuff sadly happens.
And a lot of this was inspired by real events. I had friends who were in the Florida National Guard during Hurricane Andrew, and it played out pretty similarly. The National Guard folks were rolling around locked and loaded while the 82nd Airborne went down there to help out. And, gang members were stealing M16s from paratroopers because they didn't have any ammo. They weren't allowed to have ammo. So I kind of overlaid this onto this scenario onto a zombie apocalypse.
I've heard some horror stories from people that did the New Orleans Guard motive activation during Katrina. It always surprises me how far how fast like society will crumble. I think they said we're like 3 days away from cannibalism is the running joke because, the food supply issues.
Yeah, that's what they say. They say that's all the food people have in the refrigerators. And after that, society collapses. Hopefully we never find out.
So do you go into what your main character's MOS was in the military before he went to Leavenworth?
So he was an infantryman.
Okay.
He was a staff sergeant, squad leader in Afghanistan, as the book starts out. Comes home on R&R, finds his wife in bed with another man. A fight ensues. A shotgun comes out. The other man gets wounded. So our hero ends up getting court-martialed, basically for attempted, murder, manslaughter. And he's convicted and put away. So he's basically, crime of passion, unintentionally ends up in Leavenworth. So when he, is in the situation where the zombie outbreak is occurring, his MP guard goes out to take care of something that's going down in the street outside. The MP guard gets zombified. Our hero in his brown prison jumpsuit goes out there, has to put down a couple of zombies with a nightstick. Doesn't know what else to do, strips the uniform off the MP and, flees. So when he ends up with this unit in Kansas City, they think he's military police. But, obviously he's an escaped felon. And then the fun and shenanigans ensue.
So 2 questions that didn't occur to me when we did the interview. One, do they ever figure out what really happened with him later in the series? Or is that a spoiler?
I don't want to give too many spoilers away because it's kind of woven into the storyline.
Okay. And then second question, wouldn't they have to worry about the infection if he's stealing the uniform of someone who was infected?
It didn't. Luckily for him, it wasn't that messy. So he ended up, being able to do that. But later on, as they fight close quarters with zombies, they have to strip their uniforms off, burn them, go through chemical decon process, quartermaster showers. So, your chemical, biological, radiological units are in there doing deliberate decons, like the mobile car washes for Bradleys and tanks and helicopters. And, people have to go into quarantine for days, and they set up those. There's some detail in there that I think folks that are into this sort of thing might appreciate.
It's giving me flashbacks to when we had to clear customs on our vehicles and you spent hours spraying them off. Nope, you missed a spot of dust. Wash it again.
Take it down the wall track. Yeah.
And it was even worse because our the customs people for us were a bunch of Navy pukes. And so they had fun messing with the Army because they could. Like, oh, look at the infantry guys. Let's mess with them.
Well, and funny enough, in the beginning of the first book, the infantry folks at the checkpoint start screwing with our hero because he's got an MP brasser dog. They intentionally fuck with him because he's an MP. Because everybody hates MPs.
Yep. Yeah. They are not making a lot of friends and winning a lot of hearts and minds.
To all my MP friends out there, I love you. But,
All right. And next we got sponsor also of the show is the one, the only Mr. Len Berry. Len, can you tell us about the loyalty of Severus? Can you give us the elevator pitch?
I mean, the super quick elevator pitch is it's Dune for trans girls. The other super quick elevator pitch is, hey, do you want to see space Romans fight future Amazons? This is a cool place to do it.
So it's space fantasy then?
It's actually kind of, yeah. It's space opera. I mean, it's
okay.
There's some interstellar combat. Well, more in book 2 still to come. But there's lots of different planetary locations, very different planets themselves. Politics, intrigue. People get tired of that. They start shooting each other. Fun.
Nice. Now, did you publish this yourself? Is it with a publisher?
I did it myself.
Nice. We'll have to get you off the. When the podcast ends, you and I will link up. We'll schedule an episode where we talk just about series. It sounds interesting enough. You have people when you say Dune, they're always willing to listen to more at that point.
Oh yeah, I've realized that I was saying for the longest time the Space Romans versus future Amazons line. People go, oh okay, and then I say Dune for trans girls, and I go, all right, tell me more.
All right, and this is the best image I can find. I'm sorry of the original Alien cover, but obviously we're here to talk about the movie Aliens, and so as such, the religion questions will all be tweaked accordingly. So the first one came from my son as we watched the movie today to refresh my memory is, who would win, Master Chief from Halo or the alien from the movie we're reviewing?
Well, Alien, of course. Alien always wins in the end.
Okay, Len?
I mean, especially given a particular sequel, I'm going to have to get that to the Alien as well. Especially now, it's going to be a tight battle. And if it was just any other Spartan soldier, Alien would mop the floor with them. But yeah, Master Chief's at least going to give him a run for his money. But I did see Romulus, and yeah, the Alien.
I haven't seen Romulus yet. So based on the ones I've seen, I'm going to give it to the Master Chief only because they've already fought lots of different kinds of aliens. Some of them with awesome technology better than his, and he still won. And they fought the Flood. So, they're used to contagious aliens, purging them with fire. All right. And because we like to mix it up with more than one question, who would win between the Warhammer 40K Space Marines or aliens? Or the alien from Alien?
Hey, we've seen the Space Marine thing against the aliens go before, and we know how that ends.
I'm just saying,
aliens.
I don't know. I always think it's just whatever you put Warhammer 40K Space Marines against anybody, I give it to them because they're made to be ad absurdum on purpose that it's almost so overpowered. Like that was part of the joke at the beginning. So I just
and nobody would double that now. I see so many images I see so many images of Space Marines choking like 3 or 4 Tyranids at once and then stomping on 2 or 3 more on top of that. And I'm like, Well, a Tyranid's just like a better armored, not quite as acidic alien. So yeah, Space Marine.
All right, and this is for you, dear listener. Who would you put in a battle against Alien? If you want to do a one-on-one comparison, with these are kind of fun because you can discuss them and just get nerdy about things. So, dear listener, who would you want to see in the Alien versus whoever fight? And then weigh in on who you think you could win. And if you give us one, we'll throw it in the episode when it posts and hopefully have a lively discussion. All right, and then this is the important one. What is your favorite Alien movie?
Oh, Aliens.
Mine too. The second movie. What about you, Len?
Hands down.
Oh, I'm a weirdo. Prometheus.
Really? I didn't hate it, but it wasn't my favorite.
I just love how weird and bonkers and crazy it is. You know, I like, okay, all right, this is an interesting mystery, and I'm thinking about creation and the origins of life. And is that a vagina cobra?
Yeah. So, all right, I am pulling up the Alien movie so we can get hopefully the anniversary edition is out there. It's got some pretty cool perks, but I'm gonna see if I can find a description of it that will allow us to use. Sadly, I can't find one. So basically, in summary, this movie is what happens when you create all of your safety protocols to how to prevent the spread of contagions, and then you promptly ignore them all.
Yep.
So
there's something going around a meme, I think. Crazy cat lady tells everybody, the issue. Nobody listens to her. Everybody else dies except for crazy cat lady and her cat.
Yep.
I mean,
that's exactly what happened.
Sums it up.
Yeah, I like how they waited to do the reveal, like with the movie when they finally do show the alien, and I think I've got a picture of it. I'll show up. But when they finally do show the alien, it isn't like so early that you can't the suspension is there for a long enough time. I think that it really keeps the tension, which I really liked. Sadly, it pixelates because the movie was set in 1979.
Yeah.
Is that picture from Alien or from Aliens?
I don't know. It said Alien, but a lot of times people online, when they share this stuff, mix it up.
Yeah, because James Cameron did change the design.
And that's just another cool one.
Yeah. Now, that one's probably closer to the original design. And one of the cool ways you can tell is, with the exception of the most recent movie, if you can see some silhouette of the eyes within the skull, that's the original. That's closer to the original Giger design, which is something that James Cameron completely got away from, and until Romulus came out, nobody even came close to it again.
Why did they change it? Did they say? I'm not as up on the floor.
Actually, so Giger's design, he wanted it to be clear, and this portion, you see the skull, and his intention was that they would actually pour live maggots in there, and it would all kind of crawl around and everything, but the camera couldn't pick it up worth anything, and it looked worthwhile. It just looked like a big fake mess. So they said, all right, well, we'll just keep the rest of the design and just not pour in the maggots.
Probably good for the person who had to wear the suit.
Yeah.
Probably really good for the person that had to wear the suit. Yeah.
So one of the things I do like is the way they did this movie is they kept the tension. So I like the way you kind of get the cold open where you see things going on with the opening in the space ship's command center. And you see the screen reflecting on the helmet, presumably that the pilots would be wearing. They're just sort of sitting out of the way. And you see the cat moving. That's the first thing you notice is the movement in the back of the cat, which I thought was kind of cool because the idea that you would go to space and take pets was just interesting. Although I guess it makes sense that you put a cat on a ship for the same reason you would put a cat on a sailing ship.
Yeah. We listen, when I was working at the embassy in Australia, we have this big multilateral exercise called Talisman Sabre. And I remember we had an American supply ship full of all this equipment. Everybody had been briefed about how strict Australian customs are. over and over and over again. And of course, this ship that was going to hold up the entire exercise had been planned for 2 years with tens of thousands of troops from many countries. This whole thing got held up because the captain decided to bring his cat and didn't tell the Australian authorities. So yeah, I believe they bring a cat into outer space, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, so I like the way it opens. I will say that when you see the tour of the ship, as they go around, it was definitely the very 1970s aesthetic for what a spaceship would look like the computer center where it was all those random lights that did absolutely nothing. They were just there. Although I am not convinced that some of those dials, switches, and lights on the NASA stuff isn't there for the same reason, just so the engineers can charge more.
Yeah, you got to have your 70s blinky lights for space stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. And all of the hissing noises when all the doors open. It's just kind of
my
amusing.
God, yes.
Although at least they had the double airlock on these ones. Like they'd have the one and then the other like open, which kind of makes sense for section off the ship if you take damage. So I liked that they took the nod to that.
Yeah.
It was definitely very 70s when they're sitting around eating when they first wake up and they're just smoking on the ship.
Oh yeah,
smoking. It's a white room. I think it's like an octagonal table, hexagonal table.
Yeah, I think. Well, the table shape was very much they wanted to be able to get everybody in the shot, so they just
absolutely.
Yeah, and what got me was all the food looked like it was like fresh, and I'm just like, that does not look like anything reconstituted. And they've been asleep for how long?
Yeah.
So what would be fresh? And that's the other thing I noticed when she abandoned ship. She did not take supplies with her for living to the ship with her. So I hope the ship itself had rations at the end when she jumps on that lifeboat. But I really like the aesthetic. It does kind of make me think, and it's going to end up being a topic for a different episode. But if they don't have FTL, so they don't have faster than light travel, which is why they do the sleep thing, then the ones that are living on ships are going to end up with a culture very different from the ones back home, because time's going to fly for people on the planets. And so that would be like if you got on a ship and you left in the 70s and it's like psychedelic, man, and you come back to like, I don't know, whatever we got now, like you're going to be in culture shock, and they're going to get that every time they hit a planet. So what you're going to end up with is culture different from ship to ship, because it's based on when they left as a crew and when they get back, and it's going to bifurcate culture in weird ways.
Like Haldeman's Forever War.
Yeah.
I have not read that one. It's on my list to read. I'm guessing it's really,
you have to read it. Have you read Starship Troopers?
I have.
Then you must read Forever War. They're very, very different books, but Forever War goes to exactly what you were just talking about.
Yep.
Precisely what you were just talking about.
I think episode 2 of the Sci-Fi Shenanigans before we rebranded was a review of Starship Troopers, and we have been Blasters and Blades for almost 3 years now, or no, 4 years now. This is episode 4, season 4. Yeah. And I still get hate mail for that episode that was like 6 or 7 years ago, because I said, as a piece of fiction, I liked the movie better than the book. The book to me read more as a political treatise on par with reading Machiavelli than it did an actual fiction novel. And since I found the movie first, I expected an action book like I was used to. And then it was all of his like theories on government and organization. I mean, the battle scenes were there and they were cool, but they were not the main focus. People have opinions on that book. Strong ones.
I would love to talk about that book, but that's not what this episode's about. So.
You know what? We ought to do another review of that book and just revisit it with different guests.
I would love to. Let's do that sometime. But I don't want to do this episode.
Absolutely. I'm going to make a note for that when we get done. Don't let me forget. And so I did like, it makes you think. And that's one of the things I will say movies in this era did. For all they were cool and they were action and, some of the psychedelic effects, they definitely were cerebral as well as action movies. Because like I said, you're thinking like, well, how does culture change if you've got space travel without FTL, or what happens with the cryo freezing and all that, those kinds of questions. It's definitely interesting to think about.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I do like going back to your aesthetic comment. I really like what they did with Alien. And you could tell by the late 70s, even with Star Wars a couple years before that, they were getting into a grittier look, like a grimier, more broken in look. You know, if you could look at the original Star Trek series, everything looks brand new and fresh and clean. These are a very, very different feel to them, which I think feels more realistic, especially in a blue collar or military setting, where you're using equipment that's hand me down, and you know you're living and you're sleeping in your same clothes, and you know all that stuff. I think there's a lot to that, the look and the feel of the film.
And you kind of got that the world, the idea of what the world was like when you hear the two maintenance guys talking about, you know, more shares, they're not paying us enough.
Oh yeah.
Presumably the shares would be like the shares of the profit that each mission might make.
Yeah, and they were each getting half a share by contract, if I recall.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, they get a full share if they survive this part because the clause for investigating.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because what was it? Was it Lambert? Trying to keep all my characters straight, or was that? Oh, the guy, the character Yaphet Kotto played when he was, you know, complaining about the shares, and you know, and then Dallas, the captain's like, you know, you got what you got. You already signed up for this trip. You know, you can renegotiate the contract on the next trip. You know.
Yeah, and they said, well, what happens if we don't want to go? Because they were basically like, man, I got bad vibes about this. He goes, you don't get paid. It's pretty easy. You just go home and you have wasted this time.
Yeah. You don't get paid.
That seemed to do the trick for the crewmen. They're like, oh, I guess we're gonna go investigate this alien.
Yeah.
So
it's Parker. Sorry, I'm looking at IMDb right now.
That's
Parker was who Yaphet Kotto played. Yep.
Nice. Were there any things? Well, first off, do you guys remember when you first saw this movie?
Oh shit, I was a kid. I was way too young to be watching this movie.
Same.
Oh God, I think it came out when I was 7, and I probably saw it on HBO when HBO was a thing, and when it first came out. So that had to be like 1980, 81, something like that. And I remember my grandmother was coming over visiting, and she's like, "What is this? How are kids watching it?" You know, when HBO first came out. Like when HBO first came out, they were playing R-rated movies in the middle of the day. Like,
oh yeah,
you know, later on they played them later in the evening when you know the kids were supposed to be in bed and whatnot. But when it first came out, man, it was full on.
Yeah, I think for me, I found it when it was on HBO, probably as a kid, but it would have been when I was in high school, so late '90s. This movie was made just a couple years before I was born. Len, did you watch this one in theaters? Or is this one you found as a younger?
No. I was exactly 0 years old when it came out. So it took till it showed up. I think it was one they showed on like ABC's like Sunday night movie. So it's like, wait, what?
Well, they cut all
back when they did that, and they would just say parental discretion advised, and we'll just go to commercial occasionally, and you know, send the kids to bed before you know the guy gets his head tore off or anything.
Yeah, I'm always surprised.
It was that era when I watched it.
When you watch the same movies where they're like the TV version where they cut out some of the gory stuff, and then you go to watch it later because you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And then suddenly there's stuff like, oh, I don't remember this scene. Because I've done that a couple times watching a movie with my kids.
Not a whole lot in this movie that's super gory.
No, but there are some movies that I've gone back and I've watched with the kids because I watched it on daytime television where they cut stuff and I didn't realize. And then the scene comes up and I'm like, oh, cover their eyes.
That would be Alien 3.
Yeah, so this one, as far as like the horror elements, I would say it was more psychological thriller.
Oh yeah,
than anything.
No, it was great because there was a lot of tension, a lot of buildup, and like you just said, I mean, as far as the gore goes, and there wasn't a lot of that. You didn't see a lot of the alien, but there was good story writing, good acting, good pacing. It was just a really well done film. It's a classic, and it holds up well. You could watch it today.
Does.
You know, I had my daughter when she She's 21 now. It was a couple of years ago, so she was still old enough to see it. So it was like the first time she'd ever seen it. And, you know, it holds up for sure. Great movie.
Yeah, I surprisingly well. Some of the movies that come out of this sort of era, like especially the horror type movies, you almost have to watch them in pitch blackness or you miss things. This wasn't one of those movies where you had to watch it in total darkness to catch everything. There was enough light in the movie that you could watch it without having to make accommodations to your living quarters, which was kind of convenient. I mean, I still watch it in the dark, but it's nice when you don't have to.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ridley Scott's big on his color separation, his dividing lines, his set pieces. So it's always going to be strong visual whenever he's involved, even if it's just, hey, something in the backyard.
So I want to talk about the part where they, right after they land and they go investigate the alien vessel.
Sure.
I don't want to get ahead of anything.
No, we're talking broad strokes and then letting the conversation go where it goes. So
yeah. So what I found interesting was I saw this movie, reruns as a kid. You'd see them on Sundays, and it was this movie that really freaked me out when I was a kid. And I caught it later on. It's called Planet of the Vampires. That came out in 1965. And when I watched it later on in life, I go, holy shit, the movie Alien ripped off entire scenes from this movie from 14 years before. And you have to see it and you'll go, holy shit, this is exactly the scene. Ridley Scott ripped this film off 100%. So the scene I'm describing is they land on this planet and there's this ancient derelict ship. Does this sound familiar? And the crew goes off to investigate and they find the crew, which was these giant aliens, but they're skeletons now all at their station. This probably all sounds very familiar, but it was all in the movie Planet of the Vampires. And Alien totally peeled that off and redid it skillfully. And it was well done, but man, it was they totally lifted it.
Was that movie worth going back and revisiting?
I think it was a B movie back then, right? And there's no vampires in it, so I don't know why they call it. I don't think there's vampires, but there are zombies. So there's two ships full of these two ships full of humans from Earth. They go to this planet, and one gets there before, and the other one gets held up, and they get there later, and then they find the crew of the first ship. Everybody's dead, so they bury them. But there's this weird ancient force on the planet, and like I said, they go find this ancient derelict ship, and then the crew of the first ship wakes up and then starts attacking the crew of the second ship, and they got their ray guns and they're smoking zombies and shit. It's a hoot. I'd recommend watching it. It's worth watching. It's crazy.
Okay.
If you look it up on YouTube, you'll see some of the trailers for it, so you get an idea what I'm talking about.
Nice. I'll have to check it out. I mean, I like the campy movie, so
it's great.
I'm just having flashbacks now to This Island Earth. I don't know why.
Good movie.
Yeah.
So one of the things
all
that
the good movie
is
very
they open
panned
up,
because of its MST3K version, but anyway, I digress.
Nope, totally cool. One of the things you learn for people that are really into movie and cinema is the filmography has always the history of this led to this that led to this. So it's cool to, just like with books, we all stand on the shoulders of what came before us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I liked when the culture they set on the ship felt very merchant marine vibe to it, which they were going for. It was definitely not a military ship. I liked that they kind of kept it separate. I know in later movies, obviously the military type organizations get involved, but this definitely did not feel like they were trying to do a pseudo military, which I think added the ability to get some of that tension because the lack of discipline among people who aren't required to be fit. And then when they land, like you said, seeing the turbulence and how they did the scenes where they were shaken in the seats, and then you get to the outside and it sort of pans into the view of outside the view screen on the pilot's hatch. All of those, the way they cut the scene, and it wasn't done in such a way that it made me dizzy. Some movies, when they do the shaky cam for effect, it's just like, okay, let me watch when it's over. This one was done with, I don't know, just enough discretion that like it was done just enough. Did anybody else notice that when you guys were watching the landing scene?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the whole foundation that Ridley Scott said, well, that his mindset was it was space truckers. So it definitely has that grungy vibe we've been discussing. The lack of discipline, there might be things like, hey, call out this code or something. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, I want to get down the road so I can get paid. The whole look of it follows along with that.
I grew up in a very blue collar community, and I identified with those characters very much.
Yes,
they seem very real to me as you watch it, and I don't know that I would call it. We look at discipline in the military a different way, but there was a very distinct chain of command going on there. Everybody referred to Dallas, the captain. They may have if he said something, they may have given him lip about it. But at the end of the day, when he said, no, this is what we're doing, everybody said, yep, I guess that's what we're doing.
And there was the mention when Sigourney Weaver's character Ripley was on the ship and they were all out exploring the alien vessel. And she made the call not to let Kane back on because he had the face hugger on. Because that was the protocol, right? Like we had these quarantine procedures in place. Which I guess we notice now post-COVID more than probably we might have before that.
Yeah. But we watch that now. We're like, I don't know if they would have let him in. But.
Right. And so, but
you say that, but people wanted to go to Applebee's in 2020.
They did. That's true.
But because of that, like they did mention, she's like, as the science officer, I'm third in charge, and I take command if they're off the ship. And then the doctor obviously overrides her. And we're going to do spoiling the hell out of this movie, but it's like over 40 years old, people. So get over it. I don't want to think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
My older sister was born the year this came out. So I did like that they made a nod to because even Merchant Marine, there's a chain of command. Like, there's a hierarchy, just like there is in any civilian job, right? So I thought that worked the way they did it. Now we're going to jump over when they had the two mechanics in the back and they're like, it's probably taking about 14 hours. And then the first thing he does is to get on with the boss, 25-hour job. Yeah. I was like, that is a universal thing in any career field. Because then if you do it early, you're the hero, right?
Brett and Parker. Yeah.
Yeah. Those two, like, I really like those two together. they like fed off each other.
Oh yeah, they were great. They were great. Harry Dean Stanton and Yaphet Kotto. They're two giants, when it comes to actors. I don't know if anybody, in the contemporary generation remembers them very well, but those guys were amazing.
Yeah. I think maybe this is just my cynicism, but I tend to see actors in some of the older movies were more dynamic because they didn't rely on green screen. So everything was facial expressions and delivery. Yeah. In fact, they've started going to, when they want that kind of acting now, they have to go to like Broadway type act, like people who do live plays or are classically trained, because some of that, like you just can't capture it when you're like, oh yeah, there's a green thing and I'm supposed to pretend that's an alien.
Yeah.
Well, there's a stick on a pole. There's a stick and there's a tennis ball at the end of it. Be afraid.
Right.
I mean, I remember Yaphet Kotto and Live and Let Die, James Bond movie, he's so good. Harry Dean Stanton and Kelly's Heroes, that guy was an actual World War II vet, a grunt, so playing a grunt, he's a natural at it. So those guys are amazing.
And the one thing I really liked when they had that scene where they're talking to Ripley and she's like, on this mission, if we make it back, everyone gets a full share, is they had the air kicking out to make it like create the tension, the ambiance. And then as soon as she left, they like turned it off like it wasn't really necessary. They were just trying to make it look worse than it was. Yeah, I loved that so much.
Yeah. No, that was a good touch.
Yeah. And the fact that they like just filmed it just casually turning it off, like shrug and the little shoulder shrug he gave when he was done. I was laughing so hard, probably way too hard at that scene, but
yeah. Well, and you could see there's, their little labor versus management thing going on the whole time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
What did you think of as they're exploring? Well, first off, the matte painting that they used to show the alien ship. I like that it wasn't clear. Like, obviously in new movies, like, you'd get a more crisp image. I like that it was unclear. Like, wait a minute, is this just some weird alien mountain, or is this actually a ship? I like that little bit of, obfuscation until they walk in and be like, oh, this is actually an alien ship.
Yeah, because you're looking at it and you don't know what it is, right? Because is this a space station, or is this a organic thing, and is it a creature? What is it? Because up until that time and all these most of your science fiction movies and shows, you'd have rocket ships and they're all pointy and you knew what they were, but that thing you didn't know what you were looking at. So
it sold the notion of something very much not from Earth, and it wasn't even the core thing that we were worried about in the movie. And that's one of the things that really made it even more, forgive the word, alien, is that it seemed so, my brain can't process this. I'm used to, like you said, rocket ships and flying saucers. That's what it's supposed to be. Maybe some fins, maybe some nacelles like Star Trek. No, this is something that looks like it's going to breathe or poop itself in orbit.
Yeah. No, right. It's totally alien. So.
And one of the things that they liked is the touch as they're exploring. It almost feels like they're in a cave system, which is not uncommon for people to experience. Like in fiction, you go through the cave and suddenly this alien predator jumps out at you. And that's the vibe you're going for. And then suddenly they crawl up the hatch and they're in, it almost looks like a throne room, but it's obviously the command center. And then you look at the scale of the humans and this giant, massive alien, and it just the size difference, the kind of the David versus Goliath vibe adds something to that ambiance. Cause then it's like, oh, these are mighty things. And if these mighty things lost to this alien, well, how much more badass is this alien compared to like the tiny little humans?
And I love the fact that it was a derelict ship and they hinted that it had been there since antiquity, had been there for a long, long time, which added to the mystery of it. I kind of like where you have these stories they pick up and, you can speculate all day long as to what happened before, and they never really get into that. You're just dealing with what's happening right now. And I love that sense of mystery. And that's one of my pet peeves is these origin stories. We have a series and then we're like, oh no, we got to go back and explain how all this started. No, we don't. No. Just leave it alone. Leave the mystery. It's better that way.
People wouldn't talk about Demolition Man nearly as much if we knew where the hell they used those 3 seashells. I mean, sometimes not knowing is the fun. Like, I was told I was heretical in some of my college history classes because I said I like the idea that we didn't know what happened to Roanoke because that mystery, right? Like, what is Croatoa? I like that the mystery, sometimes not knowing is part of the fun.
There's all sorts of prehistory. We don't know everything that happened before. Why do we need to know everything in art, in film, in writing? Just it picks up here, and that's where we're at in the story.
So one of the things in this universe I thought was that the creators back in the 70s were definitely, because if it was aired in 79, it's probably filmed in 77 to 78 range. Yeah. And so, they figured, oh, well, we're doing the space race now. We've landed on the moon. Sure, by 2037, we're going to have this huge spacefaring society. And I'm like, oh, you hopeful fools. Because now, obviously, in 2024, well, maybe not so much.
George Jetson and all that stuff.
Yeah, this is like Cold Fusion. It's always 20 years away, and it's been 20 years away my entire life.
Yeah.
This is the space travel like this is always just 20 or 30 years into the future. And so when I first saw that, and I'm like 2037, and I'm looking at all this tech, I just had to chuckle. because it was funny. So, did you guys catch that when they were showing the intro to the movie?
No, I didn't catch that year.
But, I thought it was like 100 years past that, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I could be wrong. I saw 2037. That could have just been a mission number. I assumed it was the year.
Yeah. Even if it's 2137, I think that's optimistic.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get there from here that quick.
Okay, it said
No, we're not.
2037 was on the thing, but apparently that was a mission number. The movie was supposed to happen in 2122.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Hopefully we get there from here. Not the alien part. I don't want to.
I think like the 2077, I think that might be Prometheus.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like I said, I just thought it was interesting. I thought that was the year when I watched it. When I was watching, I thought that's what the year. What did you think of the way they showed the computer screen with the mother?
It's very old school.
Very.
It's fun to watch these old movies and see what their perception of what the future is going to look like. And that's a great example. But, they're obviously having to leverage the technology of the day to try and make something look futuristic. But, I know we're not talking about the movie Aliens, but there's a lot of that in there too, where you're seeing a lot of kit and equipment there that's supposed to be space age, futuristic, and it's quite quaint, in today's world. Like the cameras over the shoulders and, the picture of Ripley's daughter, it's all hyper pixelated and, it's like, yeah, okay. Glad you got it.
Too is with the computer stuff, Mother especially, is that you get you get just the data, just the basic text data, and that's easier to send than say a picture or especially video or audio. It's just like, here's your mission report. Here's some text on the screen. Boom, done.
I didn't have a problem with it. It was text only. I thought that works if you're sending data long distances for communication. Oh, yeah. Even, now it would make more sense to me. And so I looked it up. In the Alien franchise, the 2037 that we were seeing on the screen was the year in which the planet LV2 or 426, which is where they land, was designated. So the significance was the year we found that planet.
Okay, cool.
So I did a quick, the Alien franchise fans out there have all kinds of crazy wikis where they dive into all of this, up to and including they interviewed some of the people that wrote the movies to get the lore correct. I appreciate the dedication. Me, I'd like to get sleep and do other things, but hey, you do you. We need fans like that to work for the rest of us who are lazy. Right. So yeah, I liked the when they got on the ship. I liked they looked, and every time, just maybe because I played too much D&D, when they started splitting up, I'm like, no, don't do that. Because as soon as that guy went off by himself, I knew he was doomed. Kane, when he walked off and started wandering around.
Yeah, it's a rookie move. It's a rookie move.
So, what did you think of the touch of them making the alien have that acid that just could melt through anything?
Oh, yeah. What did I think of that? It's cool,
absolutely inhuman. It goes completely away from any notion of cardiovascular system that we've even considered. It's like, wait, acid for blood? How does that even work? And yet this thing is walking around and it's killing people and tearing things apart and, depending on director's cut, making cocoons. And
I think Ash said it's a hell of a defense mechanism. Maybe it was Ash that said it, or Dallas.
No, it was the doctor.
Yeah, so
it'd be Ash.
Yeah, so it was really neat when you consider it in that regard, that maybe this is a an organism. It's an organic defense mechanism, against other predators. Which, what the hell would hunt something like that?
Most of the time in nature, when you have colorful animals, it's a signal to predators to not to eat them, because most of the time they're poisonous. So.
Yeah, I like the way they did the life cycle of the alien. So it starts off as an egg. When the egg senses motion around, they can hibernate in stasis long term. And it senses motion and suddenly opens it up. And whenever anything unwary gets near it, boom, egg, face hugger, then face hugger to planting something in the body, keeping the body alive long enough that it can incubate the alien that then eats its way out of the host and takes off and then grows from there pretty quickly into full size. Because I mean,
nasty parasite.
Talking a matter of hours from when they brought him on the ship to it's a full size beast. And of course, when they're looking for him, they still think it's that little creature they were looking for.
Yeah.
Until the mechanic finds the what do you call it? The skin that it shed, like you think with a snake or something, like a lizard. And of course, he doesn't live long enough to tell anybody. Which I like that. And even the face that they gave it, where the mouth within the mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always, before the prequels came out, I always, speculated or imagined that, the aliens came from this world that had this ecosystem that was super aggressive, right? Like these were just low tier, like ants or whatever, and their planet. And there's some really nasty shit going on in that world that you don't even want to know about. But then they did the prequels, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I liked before the prequels not knowing what the aliens' homeworld was like. I mean, because the Acheron, which was what they named LV-426 when they found it later. Well, they later named it. That's just where we found them. That's not where they originated from.
Right, and they were on another ship, so they came from somewhere else.
Right, and then you start thinking about, because like much like offense and defense or yin and yang, they advance in a yo-yo fashion back and forth. Nature is largely the same way. As one predator develops X, the prey has to find a different way to survive, and you end up with biological and evolutionary pressures. So to think about what those pressures might have been to create this thing, I found that fascinating, and I agree with you. I felt like Prometheus sort of, I mean, it was a good movie on its face, but then when you start thinking about it after watching this movie again, you're like, oh yeah, they kind of made them less cool.
Yeah, in my mind, I think if they had just come from some world with a hyper aggressive, ecology, ecosystem, I think that would have been cooler. That they were just another creature, but they got loose in the universe against an ecosystem that had no defense against it. Which, where have we seen that before?
I mean, kudzu is like that. There's a couple of invasive species that are hitting Louisiana too. I mean, there's lots. I mean, invasive species that go out of where they originated and just go havoc because there's no natural.
Yeah,
right. It happens.
Rabbits in Australia.
Right. Yeah, great.
Wild boars in America.
Right.
Right.
They were released by Spanish.
I think if they would have just left it at that, that would have been enough. It's just an invasive species. One species, space traveler had a brush with them and it went bad. And then this other species, humanity, has another bad brush with them. I think that's enough. I don't think they needed to have the prequels to get into the engineers and whatever. It's just like,
I agree with you. What did you think about the reveal with Ash, the doc, that what he was?
It is a clear signal of what the actual villain of the movie is. If you think the monster is the villain of the movie, you're wrong. It's the corporation.
And that becomes clear later on.
Oh, yeah.
The certain companies that are fictional are some of the most iconic. You got the Yakutani Plaza, so the Yakutani Corporation, obviously Die Hard. You have the corporation from the Aliens franchise, which I can't pronounce, but everybody knows who it is. Weyland-Yutani. I couldn't remember the Yutani part. But those corporations aren't real, but everyone knows who they are, to the point where like I've seen jokes where you could buy manuals put out by companies that don't exist, or you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like tech manuals and merch, like company swag, which I just think is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, but Len's right. The alien isn't the antagonist in this story. and that's important. I write zombie novels. The zombies are not the antagonist in my novels. They're just creating conflict. So, and that's what the alien's doing, creating a conflict, but they're not the antagonist. And they're creating a situation that's putting these people in a bad situation that they have to deal with. And there you go. Boom. Move out.
Yeah, it was interesting. And then the other part that the doctor, when he goes crazy, first when he starts going crazy and you see the white fluid leaking from his head and he starts attacking Ripley, I backed up a couple times to figure out what the heck was going on. Did I miss something? And I realized that obviously I didn't miss anything. They just left you in suspense until they beat the crap out of it. And you realize, oh, it's a robot that's malfunctioning. Because I thought, well, does the white thing mean he's been infected, right, by the alien? And that's why he's going hyper aggressive.
Well, that's what my parents thought for the longest time when they first watched this movie. They thought after the movie was over that he was infected. I'm like, no, that's a robot.
But the funny anachronism that preceded that was when Ash was trying to murder Ripley and he rolled up the dirty magazine.
Yes.
The space version of Playboy or whatever.
Right.
We've got paper magazines in the future. Okay. I thought that was funny.
I laughed too. And as far as if you're super strong, why are you going to shove a magazine in her mouth when you could just choke her?
He was going crazy.
He was sort of tilting, going crazy, whatever. Does not compute. So
I'm gonna go with Ridley Scott's sex parallel there.
I think that's probably right. I would agree with that.
Probably unintentionally, I'll give it that. I mean, they show that at the end where it's almost nothing the entire movie other than some dudes upper body because they're in the white boxers or whatever when they're in the cryo. And suddenly at the end, she's wearing the micro skimpy underwear when she's getting, that ending scene with the alien.
Yep.
What did you think about the doctor's take on the alien itself?
Well, I thought I thought when he was talking about it, like he's like, this is a magnificent creature, it's got these defense capabilities. He was talking about it and he was admiring it a great deal for what it was. And, I thought that was interesting and believable from a scientific perspective. And then later on, obviously it reveals more as we understand what Ash's motivations are. I thought it was cool.
I really like that too. I noticed that. And like I said, it did fit for the science angle. And you see some of that in other science movies. Like if you look at Crichton's Jurassic Park series or is it Andromeda's Strain, like the absolute, almost at the expense of humanity, their love of sort of the way things naturally evolve to the point where they'd willing to let a virus, or in this case, the alien, wipe out humanity if that's what it took, just because they admired it so much.
There are times when biologists start saying, hey, have you heard about cat penises? They're barbed. Then they have to shred to make the female ovulate. I did not make that up, by the way.
That makes Weird Shifter romance novels a little bit weirder. But yeah. I mean, and then I keep thinking, like, obviously, they don't get past the how do we not die from the alien in the franchise, really. But you start thinking this corporation, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, they want to take it to study it and probably try to commercialize parts of it or whatever. Totally believable. But the idea that, they're so worried about that they ignore the risks.
It's pretty reckless. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility that I don't believe it. I mean, we've seen corporations do reckless things before. I could think of a few of the
laboratories.
Yeah, or the shortcut some of the oil companies took when they crashed in the 80s and they didn't have the double holes. Yeah. So I mean, it's totally believable to me that a corporation would be willing to risk a lot if they thought there was enough profit, the risk to reward ratio. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. I also liked that they didn't really get into how many planets does does the humans occupy? What is the government structure like? We didn't know. We know that they're space truckers and they get shares of the profit. That's it. That's all we know about human culture. And I like that gives you room. And if you watch it in America or Canada or England or China, you can all sort of impose your own worldview on it, and it still works.
Yeah.
You lose some of that, obviously, as you get further into the franchise. But that sense of wonder of not knowing what the rest of the universe looks like, it definitely left me wanting more.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think less is better sometimes with a lot of this fiction. This attempt to try and explain everything, yeah. I think you lose the story. You get lost, you lose the story because you start digging into the weeds and in all the details. I mean, in a writer's mind, and Len, if you disagree, I'd love to hear your perspective. But, we can have a background of this whole universe in our head, but you don't have to put that on in the story. No. You use that as a framework to put your in. Right. Yeah, I think less can be better sometimes.
And sometimes it's just an Easter egg. Like, if for instance, if you've only started watching Star Trek, the original series, and you just hear mention in passing of Captain Pike, but you don't know anything else about him, right. That's just cool and then when you see later, that he was, his history, it expands and it makes the universe. Sometimes those little one-liners that can be something later, I like that. Go ahead, Len.
Original Star Wars.
No. I was making reference to Captain Pike. He shows up later. Beep, beep, beep. He's just sitting in that chair, and all I could do is answer in beeps.
Yeah. I also liked that with the ship. Like, you don't really get a scale of how massive however you say that ship. Nostromo. Yeah. I'm hard of hearing, which makes sometimes catching pronunciations very difficult. Who knew being around so many explosions was going to do that to your hearing? But who knew? But yeah, I like that the ship, at first you don't get a scale of how big it is, right? And you start thinking like a lot of if you look at, Lost in Space, their ship isn't really that big. A lot of the times these ships aren't really that big because you tighten the scope of what they have to make. But then as they start running around it when the acid's dripping and you're like, oh, it's a lot bigger than we thought. Or the brief scene where it lands, like you get hints that it's so much more massive. And then finally, the final tell about how big it is where it goes supernova when they blow it up.
Yeah.
Like the implying how much mass was there and the fact that means there's so much more of the ship we could have explored and they just left you guessing. Yeah. I love that.
It's basically 4 big refineries just floating through space. Whatever fuel or components they were refining on board, obviously highly explosive. Yeah.
And then the fact that it was a cooling rod, which caused it, makes me wonder if it was an analog to nuclear.
Oh, absolutely.
And did you catch what happens when they landed on the planet? That as big as that ship was, then they detach. So what we see on the planet side, where most of that happening, that's infinitesimally smaller than the rest of the ship. Yeah, and I didn't rover at first, right? Like it's a rover in comparison. That's a good analogy.
It is.
Yeah.
No, I really.
I agree. That there's a lot of background that you're not as the viewer, being let in on, and I think it adds a richness to it. Let's your mind kind of imagine what else is going on. You're given just enough to be pulled into the story.
So, do you think if we remade it today, you could get the same effect with the emotion, the tension?
I hope they never remake it. It's perfect the way it is.
They don't have to remake it.
Yeah.
It's called Alien Romulus. It is a direct sequel to Alien. It takes place before Aliens, and the things that most people enjoy about Alien movies in the best of times, it's in that movie. And the things they don't enjoy, for the most part, not there.
I like that how much Alien affected sci-fi culture to the point where if you've seen Spaceballs, right?
Space what?
Spaceballs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That scene where
Oh yeah.
he jumps out,
No,
right, and it
not
starts
again.
right. Like I watched that at first, I just laughed. I did not know what it was from when I first watched that movie. I got the Star Wars reference and the Star Trek jokes. I didn't catch the Alien reference until years later.
I
Well,
caught
and
that
it's
it
the
was
same
an
actor.
alien reference. I just didn't realize it was the same guy until later.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that. So it was the actor that played Kane?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It was the same guy.
Yeah, it's John
So
Hurt both times.
that makes it not again even funnier.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
back and
that's
watch
why
it.
he
It's
says,
hilarious.
"Oh no, not again."
The other thing, so we'll speak of, since we're talking about Kane, I was surprised that they opted to space the guy when he was dead to bury him. I would have thought, given what he died from, the alien shooting out of him, they would have wanted to ice him to let the scientists study him.
Well, that's a great point, because Kane was so, or Ash rather, Ash was so adamant about getting this sample and studying it. You would have thought Ash would have insisted they freeze him so that they could keep the body for an autopsy for further study.
I think part of that is to kind of placate Ripley's earlier notion of, "Hey, we don't need to break protocol," and they broke protocol, and now the man is dead, and there is an unknown creature on board our ship that killed him.
No, I think it worked within the scope of the tension they created on the crew. So I'm just noting, from a practical point, from the science people's perspective, I was surprised they didn't keep him, but it didn't feel like you broke the plot by not, if that makes sense. I felt like it still worked.
It didn't. It worked.
And
it may be something, there might have been a conversation that the audience isn't privy to, where that conversation did happen, where Ash is like, well, we need to keep him, and Dallas is just like, no, let's go.
Yeah.
And it also tied into spaceships, Navy ships, because the burying people at sea. Although now that guy is like space trash that's going to bump into something 1,000 years from now and cause damage.
Space trash. What's this?
Yeah, I like the idea where some of the worlds where when they do the burials in space, they push them to the sun.
Yeah, that makes more
I
sense.
like it when, that makes sense to me, because I keep thinking, if you fire a rail gun and you miss, those bullets keep going. And I'm just picturing like 1,000 years from now, you start a war from a bullet you missed, a decade or whatever. There's the potential is there, I think, for shenanigans. So, is there anything about the story that you would have liked him to explore more before we wrap this up?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, I like the film the way it was. I don't know that I personally would have wanted to see any more. And and Len, Len, you referenced the director's cut, and I saw that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if that adds more.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. It takes. The biggest thing it adds is a really weird scene toward the end of Ripley running around. She finds out that Dallas is actually alive.
Yeah.
He's been cocooned up in this weird mess. And he says, kill me? She's like, okay.
Yeah. I don't think even that added anything to the story.
Which is why it was cut for the theatrical version. No, it's another question of what's going on, and that's really all that does is ask what's going on.
Yeah, because like in writing, you want to slim your writing down. Mm-hmm. You don't have anything in your story that doesn't contribute to the plot, right? You don't have side missions. It just, if it doesn't contribute to the plot, you don't write it in a book. And I think the same should apply to film. If it doesn't, build or progress the plot, then it shouldn't even be in there. Yeah.
So
I guess that's the term I'm looking for. But
I like that they dropped us in media res in this movie. I like that there was parts we didn't know, because as much as my imagination would be like, oh, what's around that corner kind of thing, I think part of the fun is having that ability to say what's around the corner. I think if they had shown us all the things, the mystery would have been there, and it wouldn't have been as iconic as it is.
Yeah.
I think the not knowing is part of the fun.
I appreciate the not knowing element, because while there are now prequels and such, Ridley Scott's mind, especially before Prometheus or any of that happened, there was another movie in the setting, and it was Blade Runner. What's the connection there? Almost nothing. It's just there's a spacefaring culture. Here is a spacefaring culture on Earth. Here is a spacefaring culture transferring something.
Yeah.
Have
you guys heard that the movie Outland was supposed to be based in the same universe too?
Yep.
I had not.
Yeah.
I know the Predator
Soldier as well.
Which one?
I know Predator
Soldier
was.
with Kurt Russell. It was actually written by one of the writers for Blade Runner.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why both of them have references to Tannhauser Gate. It's not just playing around at that point. It's just like, no, this is a specific intersecting reference on purpose from the same creator.
And I like the Alien versus Predator linking those two worlds as well.
I'm not a big fan of that.
No, not the movie.
I'm not a hater. Just that it wasn't my fave. But going back to the Outland reference, go back and check out the movie Outland with Sean Connery.
Oh, so good.
It's supposed to be based in the same universe. It's got the exact same aesthetic.
It does. You're right.
Totally does.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, this, because we're wrapping it up, we are going to, for a second, Len, you can remind us, Loyalty of Severus, by Len Berry, for sale. Links in the show notes. Sponsor. You want to give your little sales pitch one more time, or your tagline, I guess?
If you're looking for Dune with trans girls being badasses, if you're looking for space Romans to fighting future Amazons, I've got the book for you right here.
Outstanding. And then finally, we've got the Big Dead One. We got zombies and soldiers and badassery. I think that's the best I could do for a summary. Yes. But you want to try better, Shane?
Yeah, it's the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, the fighting first, fighting zombies in the Midwest, rolling from Kansas to Nebraska to Colorado. And they're doing the best they can with what they got.
Outstanding. All right. And with that, Shane, what are you writing right now?
So right now I'm writing a military science fiction novel, Space Mercenaries, set in the universe of my other military science fiction trilogy. And I'm having a ball with it. It's all new stuff, brand new characters, new settings. But yeah, if you want to see private military, companies in action in space, this is your novel. You're going to love it.
All right. And where can listeners and viewers find you? And obviously links will be in the show notes.
Len, you want to go first? Go ahead.
No, I'm going to go to him next when he's going to talk about what he's writing and then where to find me.
All right, sorry. So you can find me on Substack.
Nice.
By this name right there. And then you can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Shane's Rally Point. And we have a good time in there. We just, as we say in the military, we drop rock and we just have a good time. And then I talk about some of my writing projects and then, tomfoolery. It's a good place to hang out.
And if you follow the podcast on Twitter, some of the memes I steal are from him. So the best memes with stolen.
As you should.
Right. That's how you show you love them. You steal them. Okay. What about you, Len? What are you writing right now? I'm presumably book 2 in the Legends of Severus.
I already have a draft down on that. I am plotting book 3. I'm also wrapping up a first of another potential series, which is I like to say that it's a biopunk magical girl thing. So instead of using wands and that sort of thing for these people to get their powers, they pop pills and say, "Hey, did you get your dosage right?" And they fight all kinds of monsters too.
All right, that sounds interesting. And as usual, dear listener, you can find us. Oh, well, but hold on. This is the part where we have to remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right books find the right readers. So it really does matter, and that really does help. And you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the bits, shoots, and rumbles, the TikToks, the YouTubes, the Twitters. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people, we have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. And more importantly, we have now a Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. Send all the shenanigans to her. She's here for it. We have our website over there on Spotify's. It's a bunch of gobbledygook. Don't blame me, blame them, but it's linked in the link tree. So click the link. And when you get there, you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. Or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until they can float on a river of Java, and it will only be the best for them, people. Coffee Brand Coffee, links in the show notes, podcast grunts, discount code 10% off. You get a discount. We get a kickback. You support an American company. It's not a drop shipping operation. They buy the beans, roast them here, blend them here, ship them out from here to there. It's a good thing to shop local. So that's sort of my shtick. I'm not anti-corporation, but I prefer you to shop local. Better for you, better for them, better for the environment. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for coming on, guys. This was a lot of fun. We will definitely invite you back, Len, to talk about your franchise, the new one. Shane, we're definitely going to do a revisit on the reviewing Starship Troopers, because why not? You'll be invited. I have your name on the list. And with that, I'm going to hit the end button. I hope you guys have a happy Spooktober. Enjoy your Halloween with the kiddos. They're only young once. They grow up so fast. And with that, we are out. Boom.